I have just been really excited for a few weeks now concerning this particular telecast. Again, those that are viewing right now, please call a friend, call a neighbor, and tell them that Celebrate is on the air, and a very special moment in history is taking place right now, because all of the talk about the resurrection, did it happen? We believe it did, but we want to look to some infallible proofs. So I want the Celebrate family to welcome my dear brother, Dr. William Guy. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Glad to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
It is said that the Shroud of Turin is the most studied, controversial artifact that have ever been studied.
That is true. There has been more money and man-hours spent on the investigation of this artifact than all other artifacts put together. There's nothing that even comes close to it.
Wow.
So, yes, that is absolutely true.
And when we say, Doctor, studied, we're not just talking about believers.
No.
But can you explain that?
No.
Because, you know, a lot of times in Christendom, people just think, oh, those Christians just trying to make something. But we're talking about non-believers alike. Am I right about that?
Absolutely.
Can you elaborate
The
on
impetus that led STURP, the Shroud of Turin Research Project, to get going and get started and do their work in 1977 was the mystery that surrounded the Shroud prior to that. Shroud of Turin has been in the possession of the Catholic Church for hundreds of years, and outside of Catholicism, it really wasn't that well known. What changed everything was that in 1898, a photographer by the name of Secondo Pia took the first photograph of the Shroud. And photography was kind of new at that time, and it hadn't been photographed before. When Secondo Pia developed those pictures, what surprised him when he looked at the negative of the image, it was completely inverted. The negative had positive characteristics. It jumped out at him. And the relief was just, it's amazing. The difference between the positive and negative was just astounding. I think we have some images to that effect.
And I, you know what, I have a picture of that actually in my office that most people have.
Oh, yeah.
That he actually took, and he literally stated that he felt like he was beholding the Lord.
Yes. Well, he saw the highest, I mean, the resolution of the image was like nothing anybody had ever seen before. And what was impressive, and the reason that this got a lot of press and made the Shroud very famous, was that the question was, wait a minute, everybody outside of Catholicism pretty much thought this was a forgery, like there have been other Catholic forgeries, you know, over the time. And they thought this was just another one of those. Well, the question arose, if this is a forgery, how in the world could a forger have created a perfect negative at least hundreds of years before the invention of photography?
That's right.
And that became an issue. Now, other investigators came along. Now, this had to be reproduced because people didn't believe him right away. People didn't believe, based on his picture of the negative, they did not believe that was really the Shroud. They thought he doctored it up. It wasn't until 30 years later, when it was retaken, that the world finally accepted that was true. This really is a completely inverted image. Others came along and started thinking along these lines. When you look at the image, you notice that in 1532, the Shroud was in a fire. That's why you see those burn marks along there. Well, as the Shroud was in that church and the church was burning down, it was kept inside a silver-lined casket. The fire got so hot that one drop of molten silver dropped onto the cloth. Now, the reason it took so long to pull it out is because they had 4 locks on that box, okay? And so they had to go to the locksmith across the street to get them to come over and unlock. While the church is burning down, they have to go unlock those locks. And so they got it open, and it was on fire at the time because of that one drop of molten silver, and they threw water on it. And that's why you see those markings on the cloth that shows water damage, where the water migrated through the cloth. Now, what's important is in 2 things. Number one, the burn markings next to the image of the body of that man on the cloth.
And I think this is very important, because I want everybody to understand this. So say that again. Those burn marks, explain again.
Yeah. Okay. On the cloth, obviously, we're talking about the image of the front and back images of a man's body on the cloth.
And I want our production crew to put that image of the burn back on the screen for us as Dr. Guy is talking.
Now, if you take a look at the body image next to those burns, if this image had been painted onto the cloth using some type of organic compound, then silver, burning at 932 degrees Celsius, would have caused some deformity, some derangement of those molecules, and you would see some scorching, some heavier scorching of those paint molecules. It didn't happen. It was thermally stable. Also, when that water was migrating through the cloth, it should have picked up some of those particles. Let's say that the image...
If it was fake.
If it was fake.
It would have just kind of diluted away and all that kind of stuff.
Well, that's exactly right. If it were put on there through some type of inorganic dust, like iron oxide dust or something, then that water would have caused those particles to go from high concentration to low concentration. It would have diffused into the cloth. It didn't. The image on the cloth is only present on the very top surface microfiber. Microfibrils. Okay, if you take a razor blade and go, you will make the image go away. It's that superficial. It only penetrates 125 1,000ths of a millimeter into the cloth. Okay, it's that superficial. And so that got people thinking, wait a minute, it's non-diffusible, it's thermally stable, so that rules out organic and inorganic painting of some type. Well, how
and
in
you
the
would
world?
have to be a supernatural painter
exactly.
to do something like this.
What are you going to use, a one camel hair brush? Because that's what we're talking about. Okay, somebody get down. And the other problem is you can't see the image unless you're 10 feet away. It's invisible. If you stand up right close to it, you can't see it. You got to stand back in order to make it out. Okay? So again, you're painting an image that you can't even see. All right? Now, the other thing, and what led to STIRP and what led to a lot of volunteers going over there to find out this mystery, was it down there in Los Alamos, at one of the labs down there, the nuclear weapons labs, they had
let me interject something, Doctor.
Yeah.
Now, how many people were investigating this cloth at one time?
Okay, the most was 70, and the number is great, that were members of STIRP proper. These were the people that went over to Turin, Italy in 1977 to carry out their investigations. Okay, so there were 70 in that particular group.
70 people.
Yeah, yes. But what led to that was when Eric Jumper and John Jackson took a transparency of the shroud, because it looked like that image had three-dimensional characteristics. It seemed to stand out in relief. And they tested that by taking a transparency in the shroud and putting it into a computer called a VP8 image analyzer, which in 1977 was state-of-the-art. Okay? And what the VP8 image analyzer does is that it interprets image intensity in terms of adjustable levels of vertical relief. The bottom line was that they got it to stand out in 3D, which demonstrated that the image could not have been formed by direct contact, by touching something, by using a paint or smearing paint on somebody and smushing the cloth.
Right. And then the image
because it
just
causes
coming on the
saturation
cloth.
points. Exactly.
Right.
When you touch the cloth, it gives you areas of saturation. You don't see this. This is a digital image that had to be projected onto the cloth by some type of radiative process. You see, and that's the stuff that led to the 77.
Somebody should be getting excited about that, because, see, somebody give the Lord a hand clap for that. Somebody, Doctor, with that said, and I think people are going to get really excited right now, because we're talking about something, but I need to ask you the first question.
Okay.
What is the Shroud of Turin?
Well, it's a piece of linen cloth. It's pretty long, 14.5 feet long, 3.5 feet wide. And impressed on one side of the cloth only are the front and back images of a man's body.
Of this person?
Exactly.
Front and back.
Front and back.
What was the size of this person?
The size of the person, okay, we have some issues here in determining an exact size. The problem is rigor mortis. We presume he'd been crucified by the condition of the body. Rigor mortis had set in, so his torso was bent and his knees were bent. He was somewhere between 5'11" and 6'2". Okay, taking into consideration rigor mortis, taking into consideration that it was printed on linen, which stretches and contracts. So that's your range, between 5'11" and 6'2".
About my size?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. All right, and what happens? This person was crucified. So give me some of the distinctive markings on this cloth, on this linen cloth, that has some distinctive characteristics.
Sure. Let's start from the gospel accounts and take a look at what happened to the body of Christ in the Passion and compare that to what we see on the cloth. Okay. The first thing that happened to him was the scourging. Okay, well, actually, before the scourging, we had the beating in the face. Okay, he was beaten before the Sanhedrin, beaten by the Romans, presumably, and we do find marks of abuse on the face. We find a swollen, perhaps broken nose. We see swelling over the eyelids and damage to one of his cheeks, so there is some evidence of facial damage. Then they describe how they jammed the crown of thorns around his head. Now, in the Bible, in the Greek actually, it is described as a cap of thorns encompassing the entire crown. And that's interesting because if you take a look at medieval art, very often they show the crown of thorns as a ringlet, like an emperor's wreath around his head. But on the shroud, we see 12 distinct blood wounds over the entire cap of the skull. So what we see on the shroud is more consistent with what we see in the Bible than in art. Okay, because
Very
think about
important.
it. Why would soldiers weave together a crown? That's stupid. They're not going to spend time weaving out
Right.
there. Okay, they're out there to torture somebody. They're going to grab thorns and jam them on his head.
Just
okay,
press it down.
And what's very important about these blood wounds around the crop of the skull? This is really important because there were a lot of people crucified. I mean, the Romans crucified millions of people. A lot of people were beaten. Some people had spears in their side, we presume, even though we don't have a lot of record of that. But only one person in history was given a crown of thorns. You see,
one person
in
Come
history.
on, somebody.
Okay? and when the executioners, when the torturers, the lictors as they were called in Latin, when the lictors were doing their bruising of this person, they asked the question, why are we torturing this guy? They would use that information to taunt them because this is supposed to be justice. They want to feel like good guys. They don't want to feel like they're just beating some innocent person. So they're going to be taunting their victim. You bad thief, you did this, you are a murderer,
right. You murderer.
And, you deserve this. And so they asked, what is his charge? What would they say? King of the Jews. And so I said, what are we going to do with this? We haven't had one of those before. King of the Jews. Well, how do we taunt that? And they got the idea of putting the scepter in his hand and jamming the crown of thorns on his head.
Wow.
And so we find 12 distinct wounds around the entire cap of the skull.
And so when you look at that facial image, there's some distinct marks. Is that blood?
That's blood. Yes, that's blood.
Can we get that on the screen?
Yeah.
So,
those are blood wounds. Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
So go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, so that is really, really important, that those blood wounds, because when people say this could be anybody,
Right.
he says, well, what this tells us is that either we're looking at Jesus of Nazareth as described in the Bible, or a forger intended us to believe that. The probability that this is just some other poor unlucky guy is just so remote as to be, you may as well say that aliens came down and make it if you're going to go that far. Okay,
Right.
It's just really improbable. So those are our choices. And really, one thing about this route is that I really encourage people to doubt it. Please, give me an argument. Give me something to say that this is, show me some evidence that this is a forgery. I've been looking at this thing for over 30 years, and I've seen every argument, and they don't have a case. There is no case. I've seen them all. The problem here, and let me give you one of the biggest problems, which comes up to the next thing, the scourging. Okay? There are about 120 scourge wounds around this body. Okay? Now, front and back,
shoulders, everywhere.
He was the markings. The markings on this body, okay, the tool that the Romans used to beat their victims was called the flagrum taxulatum. The horrible scourge is what that means, the horrible scourge.
Iron balls with sheep bone.
It actually, in the Bible, it actually describes the leaded tipped. So it's actually in there, the plumbae form. So it actually says the type of weapon. In the movie The Passion, which I thought was really well done and very good, except for that, there was a brand of flagrum that had bones that ripped the flesh. Okay, but in the Bible, that's not what was used on Jesus. It's the leaded plumbae, the plumbae form of flagrum taxulatum. So there were leaded balls, and what you have is a whip with 3 prongs, with three straps, and then leather balls in parallel with the strap. Okay, that's the markings that we see on the man in the shroud. And we find that he was hit 90 to 120 times, or had 90 to 120 lashes, and you have 3 hits, so you can divide that by 3. But anyway, these blood markings are all up and down this man's body, okay, just blood all over the place. And what's interesting is that you can make the dimensions of those wounds fit we have examples of the flagrum taxulatum today in museums, okay, and we can take those leaded dumbbell tips and superimpose them with the back of the man in the shroud, and they correspond. So it is those markings are consistent with the actual weapons that the Romans used to torture their victims. Okay?
Wow.
Now, what is most astounding is that the thing is this: if you were a forger and you are going to create this fooling, you want to fool people, you want to really pull the wool over people's eyes and make them believe that this is Jesus. So you read the Bible account and you construct this. What are you going to do? Are you going to put the blood on the image first, or are you going to put the markings? Are you going to draw your body first? What are you going to do first? Draw your body or put the blood on the cloth? What would you do?
Draw.
You're going to draw. Why would you draw first?
You have to have a perfect image first.
And you want to know where to put the blood.
That's right.
Exactly.
You gotta have spot it here.
Precisely. Any child would tell you that. You draw the body first, and then you know where to put the blood markings. When you enzymatically digest away all the blood markings, there is no image underneath. What that tells us is that the blood was absolutely there first. The blood was there first, and then the image was poofed onto the cloth. Okay?
Wow.
The blood literally stopped the image formation process from scorching the cloth. Okay, it literally stopped the process. See, all of those forgery ideas fall apart here. Nobody,
Just right there.
Right there. Nobody thought of that. Nobody.